this new CBA affected particularly the Nets? um, um, because we see they're a rebuilding team. They do have cap space, but at the same time, Cam Thomas is not re-signed.
Yeah.
Um, and there had been a few rumors on what the offer would have been last week. A lot of people thought it came in kind of low. Um, do you think that's is it indicative of how they feel about Cam Thomas going forward? Do you see him as a long term piece in New Jersey? I'm sorry, New Jersey, in Brooklyn.
Um, so to kind of break down your question a bit, one, I think you're seeing in the NBA at large, where there are guys, three guys in particular, Jonathan Kaminga, Cam Thomas, as well as Josh Giddey, who believe that they deserve more
Hmm.
what is being offered. And you're seeing it play out in real time. And I think um, Cam Thomas is in an interesting situation because I feel like the Nets are setting the mark. It seems as though the Nets are setting the market, and in turn, a lot of that perception is being fed to some of my colleagues, and then it's being regurgitated. And whenever you say things enough and people hear it, they begin to believe it as fact. Um, I know that to be true because as a reporter, enough people say you don't have sources. People believe that to be true based upon everybody saying it. It's a copycat league.
Hmm.
So go back to your question about Cam Thomas. I think that he's in a situation where people look at him as just a scorer. And I think there is more to his game than that. But the general consensus, I think, from the national audience is that he's just a scorer. And he's had three or four straight games where he scored 40 points. I also think Cam Thomas both benefited, and I think it was somewhat to his detriment as well, that he was drafted around the time that and played on a team where it was the rise of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and James Harden, and then them ultimately being traded and exiting there. And I think sometimes there's a belief that just because those guys left, that's why he got that much those he scored those amount of points. I also think that the Nets post Kevin and Kai leaving has been an open market for guys to put up stats, and people wonder if that will materialize somewhere else. It's kind of like I remember Chris Humphreys playing for the Nets. You talked about New Jersey. I remember Chris Humphreys playing for the Nets in New Jersey and then matriculating over to Brooklyn. And he was putting up double stats in New Jersey. And then when Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, everybody came over, he had an abdominal strain. He was married to a Kardashian, and then you never heard from him again. I think sometimes, depending on the dynamics of a roster and who you add or subtract, will be contingent upon how a player plays. And I think that's what's been painted about Cam. I think the only difference with that is that Cam was well respected way before he came to Brooklyn, coming out of LSU. I just think he wasn't a top lottery pick, and so because he's not a name, people scratch their head and ask questions. Um, and I think that for Cam, I think the Nets for his style of play is probably the best spot. The problem is, I wonder if he's traded somewhere else in a sign and trade. I wonder if those skill sets will matriculate to another team. There's been conversations from some of my colleagues about Cam potentially being traded to the Pistons in a sign and trade for Ivy out in Detroit, and I wonder what Cam in Detroit would look like. I'm concerned about just his market being devalued because enough people are saying it and counting it as fact. And I also think that the NBA at large is changing in a world where we often have, in at least 20 years ago, have cheered on guys who score a ton of points. It's almost like the volume scorer is now looked down upon. And I wonder if that's signaling that we're going to more of a European style of game, and B, we're actually reverting back to what a point guard was supposed to be. meaning like John Stockton, and in today's modern times, Chris Paul. That skill set of play. Like I wonder if we're reverting back to that. Um, and I also think Cam is in a similar situation, like is being put in a situation like a Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford as being a scorer for hire. And both Lou and Jamal Crawford have proven that they can start. But their specialty for their respective teams was coming off the bench. I also think that Cam is a bit undersized at the two position, and he's not a distributor at the point position. So he's kind of like in a tweener situation like a Ben Gordon. But Ben Gordon was still effective. He just didn't have longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for the insights on those.